Hello, and welcome to the University of Maryland's annual Parkinson Symposium Within Our Reach. My name is Christina Griffin, and I am the clinical manager for our center. I will be your host for today. Before we get started with our program, I want to review a few things. After each presentation, you will see 2 evaluation questions appear on your screen. Please read each question and select your answer. This is important since we use this data to decide how to improve next year's program. Also, there will be question and answer sessions after the presentations from our keynote speaker and from our 2 University of Maryland neurologists. During the presentations, you can click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen to type questions you have for the speakers. Now, let's get started with our program. First, to wake us up, Kathy Reese and her mother, Jerry Owens, will lead us in a brief session of chair yoga.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Reese, and here next to me is
Jerry. Good morning.
This is the mother-daughter team for Yoga for Parkinson's disease for your Within Our Reach Symposium. My mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's
A year ago, a year and a half ago, I think.
Year and a half ago, and you've been doing yoga for how long?
About 5 years.
5 years. So the yoga has really helped you, right?
It helps the balance a lot.
It helps with the balance, and you do a lot of breath work, don't you?
And it just keeps you lucid and you don't ache as much after you use it, I think.
Okay, good. We'll take that for sure. So let's get started. We're going to start with some nice cleansing breaths as we transition from whatever you were doing to being present in the here and now for this practice. So we're going to breathe in through the nose and exhale through an open mouth with an audible breath. Okay, so let's get started. Sit up nice and tall. Scooch away from the edge of your chair if that's comfortable for your back. If it's not, go ahead and lean in the back of the chair. It's nice to have a sturdy chair without any arms, and really good to sit on some type of a blanket or cushion to make it a little bit more comfortable. All right?
Definitely.
So length up out of your, reach tall up out of your spine, roll the shoulders back, press your hands into your thighs, and notice how that makes you grow just a little bit taller. We're going to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth now. So let's begin. Full breath in. Exhale. I am here. I am present. I am safe. Let's get our hands moving. So stretch the fingers out wide like starfish. Try to get the pinky as far away from the thumb as you can. And then curl the fingertips in like bear claws. Make a gentle fist with the hands and then fling the fingers out. So starfish, bear claw, gentle fist, and fling. Starfish, bear claw, gentle fist, fling. First thing I do in the morning every day.
I do my exercise in the middle of the night.
Middle of the night when she wakes up, she's doing her exercises.
I don't sleep well.
All right, one more time. Starfish, bear claw, gentle fist, fling. And then make a gentle fist with your hands and start to make some circles with your wrists. We're going to move through range of motion just to get our body warmed up, get some of that rigidity, and open up the joints a little bit. Now extend your arms out nice and long and tighten your fists slightly and lower your knuckles down toward the floor. Notice any sensation that you feel across the tops of your wrists. Take a breath in through your nose and out through your nose. Just normal, natural breath. Now extend your fingers out wide as you press out through the heel of the hand. Extend your arms a little bit longer and really stretch your fingers in that starfish position. One more breath here. Breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. And lower the arms down by your side and roll the shoulders up towards your ears. Soften them back and down. So a few shoulder rolls here. Make them nice and exaggerated. Up towards the ears and back and down. This one you say always feels pretty good for you.
It does.
Yeah, a couple more. Inhale and exhale. And again, inhale and exhale. Good. Let's bring our hands back onto the thighs and just get a little movement in the neck. So press your hands into your thighs to help lengthen your spine again. Draw the shoulders back slightly as you lift your heart forward. Take a nice breath in through the nose And as you exhale, keeping the chin parallel to the floor, look over your right shoulder. Look over that right shoulder and let your eyeballs continue to look over your shoulder because your neck will follow your eyes. You may get a little more movement in your neck. Take a lovely breath in here. And as you exhale, sweep your head over toward the other shoulder. So now look over the other shoulder and then keep taking the eyeballs, looking behind you. See if the neck gets a little bit more movement. Another breath in. And as you exhale, bring your head back to center. Beautiful. Let's take those fingertips onto your shoulder for some chicken wings. And lift those elbows up towards the sky as far as you can go without any discomfort or pain. As you exhale, take the elbows back down and around and point your elbows toward the floor. Now with your breath, breathe in, elbows lift up. As you breathe out, elbows reach out to the side, back and down. Let's do 2 or 3 more of those. And remember, no pain is all gain. We're just trying to get a little bit of movement, rotation, opening in the chest here. How about one more inhale and exhale. Beautiful. Now take your arms out to the side with a slight bend in your elbow. So reach the arms out to the side, palms are facing up.
Oh,
There you go. Make a little bit of bear claw with your fingers and then rotate your shoulders forward. Good. And then open those shoulders back out again. We're crashing into each other. There we go. Just making those nice movements with the shoulders. Good. Whatever you interpret is exactly perfect for you. Good. Now let's lower the arms back down, sit up tall. We're going to do sun breath. So palms are facing up. Take a nice breath in as you reach the arms up overhead. Now some of us may have tight shoulders, so goalpost feels better. Some of you may prefer a nice wide V, but if you're able to reach the upper arm in line with the ear, see how that feels as you grow long and tall. So let's reach the spine out of the pelvis, lift it up out of the pelvis, grow a little bit taller. Full breath in here. And as you exhale, turn your palms away from you and down and lower the arms slowly back down by your side. Now with the breath, 3 more sun breaths. Inhale, reach the arms up overhead, growing tall. And as you're ready to exhale, slowly turn the palms down as you reach the arms back down by your side. 2 more, breathe in. Just greeting the day, bringing a smile to your face. And you know, if you bring a smile to your face, you'll release a neurochemical called serotonin that helps you just feel better and happier. So now bring the palms together and lower the hands down to your heart. Just pause here for a moment. Just notice how your body feels, just getting this simple movement into your body. All right, let's take that right hand and lower it down by your side and reach the left arm up overhead. Take a nice full breath in as you crescent over towards that right side. Feel the opening in your side ribs and your hip. Take a breath in and a breath out. Good. Reach the arms overhead, both arms up, lengthen, and then take the other side down. So lower the other side, root down through that side, and then crescent over. Is this your favorite one?
uh-huh. Feels so good.
Feels so good. If this doesn't work for your shoulder, you can be at goalpost, or you can even have that opposite hand on your hip. All right? Remember, no pain is all gain. All right, lift both arms up overhead. Bring those palms together and lower the hands down to the heart. Take a breath. Another breath out. And you open your arms out to the side again and lift up through your heart space. Take your eye gaze up so your eyes go no higher than the seam of the ceiling and the wall. So we don't want to kink our head back and cut off the blood supply to our brain. Now give yourself a big hug. Wrap yourself in a hug. Lower the chin to the chest and round your back body, creating a little C with your spine. This is your cat pose. As you inhale, lengthen your spine back tall, lift your head up, open the arms out to the side, and reach your heart forward. Oh, just greeting the day with a smile. Exhale, wrap yourself in another hug, chin to the chest, rounding that back body. And as you inhale, lengthen your spine, lift your arms out to the side, take your eye gaze up, greet this beautiful day. Good. Now keep your arms out to the side, but neutralize your spine so you're not rounding forward or leaning back, and see if you can't reach for the back of your chair. Roll the shoulders back, straighten your arms down as much as they can, shift forward in your chair. Lengthen that spine and then hinge forward just a bit with a nice straight spine. The head and neck stay in alignment. We're just opening up through that shoulder and chest. See if you can't lean the shoulder blades in toward each other for a kiss. So they are trying to touch each other and give each other a gentle little kiss back there. All right, lift back up, reach the arms straight overhead, bring the palms together and lower the hands back down to the heart. Very nice. Let's bring our hands down to our thighs and just gently rock the knees side to side. We're going to head out now and let you enjoy your symposium, and we'll be back at the breakout. You can join us for a 20-minute yoga practice, and we'll do more of the lower body, a little bit of core strengthening, a little bit of breath work. So we'll see you at the break.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the University of Maryland Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Center's annual symposium, Within Our Reach. So this year, we had to do a virtual symposium again. During the coronavirus pandemic, it hasn't been so easy for program planners like our steering committee for Within Our Reach to figure out whether we could plan an in-person or a virtual offering. And this year we decided several months ago that the safest thing was to move ahead and do this virtually again. And that was the right decision. So we know that we can continue to keep our Within Our Reach momentum going with these programs virtually until we can hopefully get back to in-person programming next year, because safety is our #1 priority, of course. And one thing that is an advantage is the ability to be comfortable in your own home. We'll be presenting a whole range of new strategies to inspire you to live well amidst the daily challenges. So what are the differences in a virtual presentation like today? Well, one thing is that the agenda is somewhat shorter and compressed. We'll be going from 9 in the morning to 1:30 in the afternoon. And you'll be using the Zoom webinar to move through this experience. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions using the Q&A, question and answer icon that's located at the bottom of your screen. And you'll have an option to choose what breakout sessions you want to attend by using links that will be sent in your chat box. And the chat box is another icon at the bottom of your screen. And you'll be hearing more instructions about this in a little bit. You can also take breaks. We've made arrangements for there to be breaks in the program so that you can move around and take a break between different parts of the program. I'll first show you this slide that goes through the main components of today's program, and then I'll dive in deeper. So after this welcome, there's going to be a brief warm-up with 10 minutes of chair yoga. Then we're going to hear our keynote address. There'll be time for your questions and answers. We'll have presentations from 2 of our University of Maryland movement disorder physicians. Dr. Stephen Rich and myself will be giving talks. There'll be these breakout workshops where you can select sessions of your choice. I'll show you more about that in a moment. And there'll be these breaks between sessions so you can grab a snack or view videos from our sponsors. The theme of the program today is Living Well, and you'll have an opportunity to learn more about self-management skills in Parkinson's disease for both patients and care partners. And we will focus on both physical care and emotional care. Physical care in terms of diet, exercise, and symptom management. And emotional care in terms of networking with our Parkinson's community, developing potentially new hobbies, and improving your communication skills. So Let me tell you a little bit more about the offerings. The keynote address will be given by Diane Schuirman-Hagedorn, and we make a major effort, we place a priority on involving people with Parkinson's disease in not only the planning, but the offerings, the presentations during Within Our Reach. And Diane is a person with Parkinson's disease. She'll be telling you about her journey and her strategies to live well with Parkinson's disease in her keynote. She has an interesting story you'll want to hear. Those two presentations from movement disorder neurologists will be first from me. I'll be talking about managing your Parkinson's medications, strategies to manage your medications. And then Dr. Rich will be talking about managing your PD non-motor symptoms. Those movement workshops, well, there's going to be two types. One is chair yoga. The session leader is Kathy Reese. And there'll be a walking and marching workshop. That leader is Sharika Jones. We have something interesting and novel planned for today, and that is this workshop on the benefits of improvisation, improv, for Parkinson's disease. The leader of that session will be Robert Cochran, and he has done research and has studied the ability of improvisation to improve the quality of life, including depression, stress, communication, and stigma. The presentation will mix lecture with some interactive work as well. And I'm looking forward myself to seeing what we can learn about that novel intervention. I want you to know about our symposium sponsors, because without the funding from our sponsors, it wouldn't be possible to put something like this together. Videos from our sponsors will be seen throughout the day during the breaks. And you should also receive some information from our sponsors via email. The keynote address is specifically being sponsored by the pharmaceutical company Amneal. One of our main sponsors is the American Parkinson's Disease Association. And the APDA is actually also sponsors the University of Maryland Parkinson Center. We are their local APDA, Information and Referral Center. Anyone can call the center at the number on your screen, 410-328-7817, if you need Parkinson's information. So our sponsors overall are Adamas, Amneal, Boston Scientific, Acadia, AbbVie, and PRISM, and the APDA, as I mentioned, and we thank all of them. I want to introduce you briefly to our University of Maryland Movement Disorders Care Team. These are all the different members of the team. We now have 6 neurologists who are seeing movement disorders, and that's the doctors Paul Fishman, Stephen Rich, Joe Savitt, Emily Schulman, myself, Lisa Schulman, and Reiner von Koln. Emily Schulman is the newest member of our group, having finished her fellowship last year. We have a current movement disorders fellow, Dr. Margaret Ferris. We have 2 movement disorders nurses who you may speak to in the future, Des Easley and Sherry Powell. Our administrative assistant team is Dawn Daniel and Erica Miles. And we have a clinical research team comprised of Veronica Fallon, Phil Heiser, Michelle Sines, and Christina Griffin, who is our division manager. The Within Our Reach Planning Committee has many of those people on it, and it's a combination of people from the movement disorders, faculty and staff, and people with Parkinson's disease. So the program chair is Christina Griffin, our division manager. I'm the medical director, and the people on our committee who meet frequently, at least monthly, between the different annual events are Tom Bigford, Michelle Sines, Des Easley, Veronica Fallon, Phil Heiser, John Hurley, Debbie Spritz, and Julie Walker. And I want to especially thank all of them for all their hard work, because without it, there wouldn't be a program today. So thank you all for attending today, and we hope that you enjoy your virtual day at Within Our Reach.
Hello again. My name is Christina Griffin, and I will be your host for today. I hope you enjoyed the morning warm-up session of chair yoga and Dr. Schuirman's overview. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Diane Schuirman-Hagedorn. In 2014, at age 42, Diane's nearly 6-year medical mystery was solved: young onset Parkinson's disease. She had gone from walking 5 miles a day to literally being unable to walk around the block. About 6 months before her Parkinson's diagnosis, Diane set a goal to walk a mile. She has far exceeded that goal by hiking with Pass to Pass, a nonprofit that provides opportunities for people with Parkinson's disease to participate in outdoor activities. She recently completed her third 30-mile Pacific Crest Trail section hike with Pass to Pass and now serves on the Pass to Pass board. Diane says living well with Parkinson's means doing as much as she can for as long as she can, including continuing in her career, spending quality time with family and friends, and taking on new challenges. I hope you enjoyed Diane's presentation and that you'll be inspired to find new ways to live well with PD.
Hello, I'm Diane Schuirman-Hagedorn, and I have young onset Parkinson's disease. In November 2014, just days before Thanksgiving, I sat in a neurology exam room. I had waited 4 months for that appointment. In the nearly 6 years before that, I had waited. I had waited for the results of numerous imaging procedures and blood tests, and there were no smoking guns. I had waited for my body to respond positively to things like having shots for pain management, to doing physical therapy, to wearing a brace, to changing my diet, and it didn't. I had waited for a number of different doctors and therapists and alternative medicine providers to find an answer, and nobody did. I was not better. I had gone from walking 5 miles a day to literally unable to walk a square block. So I sat in that neurology exam room waiting. And the nurse came in and she took my vital signs and she asked me about my previous procedures and tests. And I saw the neurologist and she asked me to walk up and down the hallway. She looked at how I moved my arms and my legs, my fingers, we all know this test, my toes. And after about 20 minutes with the neurologist, I received the answer to my nearly 6-year medical mystery. She said, "It's highly likely that you have young onset Parkinson's disease." Her trained eye had connected my tremor, my lack of sense of smell, my reduced arm swing, my fatigue, my apathy, all kinds of things that nobody else had connected. I was 42 years old. My diagnosis was confirmed 2 weeks later after I improved on Parkinson's medication. So with diligence, over time, with assistance from medication and therapy, I regained some physical function. Not all of it. Today, if you read my bio or you hear my introduction, you might think, well, she's doing great things and she doesn't really understand what it's like to live with Parkinson's disease. It's true that today I'm 49 years old. I still work full-time, and I do things like take hiking trips and whitewater rafting trips with Parkinson's groups. I also do know what it's like to live with Parkinson's disease. I know what it's like to fall. Recently, I fell in my backyard on my concrete patio. I went from upright to on the ground, just like that. And as I was picking myself up, I had 3 thoughts. I thought, I'm thankful I didn't hit my head. And I looked around, and I thought, I wonder if any of my neighbors saw that. And I thought, I'm angry because now I have to say yes to the question, have you fallen recently? I don't like that question. I know what it's like to not have the motivation to get out of bed or get out of a chair to say, well, tomorrow I can do all those things I was going to do today. I can waste an entire day letting apathy sit in the driver's seat. I know what it's like to be so fatigued you can barely keep your eyes open. I can't tell you how many movies I have never seen the end of. I know what it's like to struggle with basic things like the buttons on a shirt or the clasp of a necklace, things that take at least 3 times as much effort as it seems like they should. I know what it's like to not feel confident carrying a stack of dishes to the kitchen sink or to carry something up or down the stairs because of a tremor or balance challenges or both. I know what it's like to lose control of your bodily functions. And I'm not going to tell you a story about that, but I think it's helpful to know that we are not alone in the challenges that we face and we experience with Parkinson's disease. Today, I want to share with you 4 strategies to empower you to live well with Parkinson's. These are strategies that I use and other people I know who have Parkinson's find useful. They are: 1, take great care of yourself. 2, accept your reality. 3, be your own best advocate. And 4, find your community. So the first thing I want to talk about is take great care of yourself. I could talk about exercise. I think it is law that anything about Parkinson's has to include something about how the benefits of exercise help us to manage symptoms. I could talk about sleep and the restorative activities that happen when human beings sleep, whether you have Parkinson's disease or not. I could talk about whose advice I follow regarding nutrition and supplements. But I would rather talk about how do we, with all of our challenges, prioritize ourselves, value ourselves, so that we can be consistent with our nutrition and our sleep and our exercise and all the things we know that we should do. I want to share with you a quote from one of my mentors. There is a magic pill. It's one that you must take every day for success. It's called consistency. That's from Courtney Townley. She's a health and personal development coach, and she hosts the Grace and Grit podcast. So how do we do this? How do we stay consistent despite our challenges? I'm going to answer the question with a question. How do you want to feel? I have worked with coaches in non-Parkinson's realms, and this question has become a foundational piece for me. It's important to say that this is not a magic bullet, and it takes practice. I believe we can modify almost anything so that we can still be successful. I believe that our thoughts lead to our feelings, and our thoughts and our feelings lead to our actions. How does this work? Let me give you an example of how I use this. Let's say I put in my calendar that at 3 o'clock I'm going to exercise. And now it's 3 o'clock and I'm tired, and maybe I'm in the middle of doing something else, and I can think of 50 reasons not to exercise. And my favorite one is, it's not going to make a difference. But if I can remember to ask myself, how do I want to feel? Then I can work through those thoughts and I can make some progress. So if I ask myself, how do I want to feel? I probably say, I want to feel as healthy and normal as possible, and I don't want to be disappointed in myself that I did not exercise. So if that's how I want to feel, what do I need to think and what do I need to do so that I can feel the way I want to feel? So I probably need to think that all those reasons that I have for not exercising are not true. It's not true that whatever I'm doing is more important than exercise. It's not true that I can't exercise because I'm tired. It's probably going to help me feel better. It's not true that exercise is not going to make a difference. So I work through what I need to think. What do I need to do now? I need to exercise for at least 10 minutes. My doctor would say 30. Maybe there's a longer exercise class that I want to join. But if I can exercise for 10 minutes or even 5 minutes, if I can be consistent with that and get some momentum and get some confidence, then I can build up from there. So maybe I exercise 5 or 10 minutes 2 or 3 times a day. Or maybe this week I exercise 10 minutes at a time and next week I exercise 15 minutes at a time. Other tools that I can use are a timer and either a calendar or a habit tracker so I know which days I've exercised. So the key to taking great care of yourself is, how do you want to feel? The next thing I want to share with you is accept your reality. I want to share a couple of definitions of acceptance. Agreement with an idea, an opinion, or an explanation, or a willingness to tolerate a difficult or unpleasant situation. With Parkinson's, we have lots of opportunities to practice acceptance, and acceptance is a process. We need to accept our diagnosis. We need to accept how those close to us react to our diagnosis. Over time, we may need to accept that it's time to stop working or driving, or we need to accept help with basic things. We need to change our plans or our goals. We need to accept that our relationships with our significant others change as they become our care partners. That's a lot, and it's not a comprehensive list. Our family members and our care partners also experience an acceptance process, and they have their own journey with it. I have heard things like, life is not supposed to be this way. I've been told that my personality has changed. This affects those close to us as much as it affects us. In different ways, but still a big impact. The acceptance process follows the grief cycle. And you may know that there are 5 stages to the grief cycle: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. We all go through the grief cycle in our own way, on our own time, and our journey may not be linear. And for our family members and our care partners and others close to us, they have their own way of going through the grief cycle, and they need to take care of themselves as they navigate that. Don't forget that. We have a choice. We can say, this is my situation, and I'm going to make the best of it, and I'm going to live well. Or we can be angry and in denial. Do make space for grief and anger. And then please choose not to stay there. Please process those emotions in a healthy way and find a way to move forward. Acknowledge what you feel. Allow yourself to experience that. Choose to get curious about it. For me, I might say I'm sad, or I'm frustrated, or I'm angry. On a bad day, I like a 5-minute pity party. I dwell on the circumstances that are happening, the emotions I'm feeling. I might cry, I might yell. And then I can look at that and I can say, okay, I'm sad. Why is that? Is there a way to reframe that? After my 5-minute pity party, I like to figure out how I can move forward in a positive way. I like to figure out what can I do right now with what I have right now. So some of the tools that we can use to move through these things are journaling. That's my favorite one. I also like a meditation practice, a gratitude practice, or even just talking to a friend. There are also tools like art therapy, and if you need to, you can work with a grief counselor. Lots of resources. Another thing that I find helpful is the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Come to a place of acceptance about your reality. Third strategy to share is be your own best advocate. Nobody knows better than you do what's going on with your body and in your life. In the 6 years leading up to my diagnosis, I went in about 90-day cycles of I need to find an answer, and I am tired of being poked and prodded and dealing with red tape. And I learned, and this is worth repeating, you are your own best advocate. Nobody knows better than you what's going on in your body and in your life. One of the best things I did in my journey is I completed a pain management program. It was a 3-week outpatient program. It took me a year to get the referral, and several members of my care team told me that it would not make any difference. Today, I still use things I learned in that program. One thing I learned is how to track symptoms to help me talk to my care team about what I'm experiencing. So in that program, 3 times a day, I recorded my symptoms, what am I experiencing, the quality of my symptoms. So for pain, is it hot, is it aching, is it stabbing, is it burning? I recorded things like, what did I eat? How much did I sleep? What did I do for exercise? What medication did I take? What made my pain better or worse? And I recorded, and this one was new for me, I recorded what was my emotional reaction to my symptoms. And in my case, I was not being honest about how my symptoms were affecting my life. Other things that I have learned in my journey related to being your own best advocate. You are responsible for asking for what you need in all circumstances. Maybe you need extra time. Maybe you need help with resources or suggestions to address a challenge that you're having. Don't assume that your care team is coordinating with one another. Don't assume that your doctor is talking to your physical therapist. Don't assume that the people close to you, maybe even in the same room with you, know what you need. You are responsible for asking for what you need. Related to that, have open communication with your family and your care team and your care partner. Share your feelings. Make sure that everybody is on the same page. For me, the most challenging thing about having Parkinson's has been the way that my personal relationships have been affected. People close to me might read or watch or hear something about Parkinson's and think that they understand me. And I say, I am the expert on what I think and what I feel and what I am experiencing. And that includes what I want and what I'm capable of. So, have open communication. And if you're not comfortable having a face-to-face conversation, you have some options. You could write a letter, you could write an email, you could record what you want to say, you could ask somebody else to be a third party, a neutral third party in the conversation. You have some choices. The next tip is learn how to navigate the healthcare system and the insurance system. Now, I know we've all got better things to do, but sometimes knowing how to navigate those systems is the way that we get what we need. Another tip is be willing to experiment. This one is scary for me. You can experiment with medication suggestions, with mobility aids, with therapy exercises, with lots of things. Here are some examples for me on things that I experiment and how I approach that. Almost every time I see my movement disorder specialist, she adjusts my medication. And I'm always afraid that if I change something, I'm going to have more side effects, I'm not going to feel as good, I'm not going to function as well. Over time, I've learned to trust that usually what my doctor recommends is a change for the better. And even so, I rarely agree to a medication change during an appointment. Usually she'll make a recommendation, we'll talk about it a little bit, and then I go home and I think about it, maybe I do my own research, and then when I'm ready, I send a message through the patient portal in my electronic health record, and I say this is what I want to do. Another example of experimenting, I talked about the pain management program that I did. I was advised by many people to use ice to manage my pain, but because I was willing to experiment, I learned that heat helps me more. So think about how you can experiment. What are 2 or 3 things where having better strategies would give you a better quality of life? And then back to open communication. Talk with your family, your care team, your care partner. Maybe you want to experiment with different ways of communicating with them. Maybe you want to tell them what are those areas where you want to experiment so that you can have a better quality of life. You are your own best advocate. Nobody knows better than you do what's happening in your body and in your life. The 4th strategy I want to share with you is find your community. Many of us probably remember the theme song to the TV show Cheers. And I can't sing, but humor me. Where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see troubles are all the same. You want to go where everybody knows your name. We know from research that social connections are as important as exercise in living well with Parkinson's disease. For me, the silver lining of having a Parkinson's diagnosis is the Parkinson's community that I have found and the adventures I have had that probably would not have happened otherwise. You need people who understand you, who you can ask questions of, who you can vent to, who you can call when you need someone to call. My Parkinson's community includes a Facebook group for women with young onset Parkinson's, a virtual support group for women with Parkinson's, my young onset activity group. That group gathers about once a month, and we do things like we take an art class, we go on a day hike, we go on a brewery tour, we play miniature golf, we go whitewater rafting. Another important part of my Parkinson's community is Pass to Pass. They are the not-for-profit that organizes the hiking trips that I go on. Hiking with Pass to Pass is like showing up and being taken care of by favorite uncles. I have a tremendous sense of accomplishment, and I have lots of beautiful pictures. So your community could be support groups, could be exercise classes, could be a choir, could be Parkinson's buddies. You have lots of options, and your community can be online or in person. With Zoom, you can have a book club meeting, you can chat with friends. There are no barriers. So if you haven't already, find your community. I talked about my hiking trips. I want you to see something from someone else's hiking trip. I want you to see Pete crossing the Bumping River. When we cross the Bumping River, we wade across. It's cold. It's about knee deep. It's hard to see where the rocks are at the bottom. It's hard to know where to put your feet. It's hard to keep your balance. I'm going to see if I can tell this story without getting emotional. When Pete stepped into the Bumping River, his body froze. And we know that in Parkinson's, freezing is something that can happen. What you're going to see in this video clip is the support hikers getting Pete across the Bumping River. And you're going to see an analogy for the things that we've been talking about. Accepting your reality, finding a way forward, and community.
Right foot forward. Come towards here. Okay, cross to bring left towards me. Push, push, push. You got it. Okay, you got it. You're almost there. Keep going. One foot in front of the other. Keep going. Keep going. Awesome. Did it. Wow. Did it.
Thank you.
Now let's get you off these rocks.
So in our time together, we have talked about 4 strategies for living well with Parkinson's. Take great care of yourself. Ask, how do you want to feel? Accept your reality. Make space for grief and anger, and then find a way to move forward. Number 3, be your own best advocate. Nobody knows better than you do what's happening in your body and in your life. Number 4, find your community. You need people who understand you, who you can ask questions of, who you can vent to, and who you can call. a social connection is as important as exercise. I have a final challenge for you. Find your silver lining. I've hiked with people whose children or grandchildren have been their support hikers, and they've made very special memories. Maybe you join a choir. Maybe you start a new hobby. Find your bright spot. I hope that in hearing my story, you have been inspired to live well, to set small goals, to improve, and to move forward. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey. It's been my pleasure.
Hello, my name is Des, and I'm a nurse here in the Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders Center. Thank you, Diane, for that talk. Now we'll get started with the Q&A session. The first question is, how did you learn to navigate the health insurance and healthcare systems? Is there a website or something else that would be helpful?
Oh, that is a good question. I was fortunate at the time. I had a healthcare advocate who I was working full time, and we had somebody who helped us navigate that stuff. So, for example, I had an MRI claim that was not paid by my insurance company, and I was able to work with that person to get that paid. So I learned a lot there. I also, as part of the pain management program, we had a workshop on navigating things and on being your own best advocate in that process. And honestly, a lot of it is just experience and asking questions. And I know that's not a particularly helpful answer, but that's kind of how I came to have the knowledge that I have.
Thank you. Asking questions is really a big portion of learning. The next question would be, apathy is one thing that keeps me from doing things that I used to enjoy. Do you have some suggestions on how to overcome it?
So I think with apathy, I think that question, how do you want to feel? I think that's also helpful. You know, do you want to have a sense that you're just letting apathy take over, or do you want to, be active in working against that? So make lists of things that you want to do, so maybe you want to go to a movie or a play or a museum. Maybe you want to have lunch with friends, or you want to have people over to your house. Figure out what you would like to do, and then figure out, what are the little steps that you can take, and make whatever that thing is that you decide to do, make sure that it's manageable, that it's not going to overwhelm you. And again, that same strategy, how do I want to feel, can be helpful in overcoming apathy. And I know that's not an easy thing.
Thank you. The next question would be, why do you think it took so long for you to get the correct diagnosis?
I consciously do not put a lot of energy there. However, I think one, I was young. I think I was 37 when I started seeing doctors for my symptoms. And two, the symptom that drove me to seek medical attention was pain. And I've read that only about 10% of Parkinson's people first present with pain. So I was sent to a lot of orthopedic specialists rather than being sent to neurologists. And so I think, that combination, my age, and that I didn't have, for example, my first symptom wasn't a tremor. I think that's probably why it took so long.
Thank you. The next question from our chat box is, do you have children? And if so, how has your PD affected them, and how have you helped them understand your condition? How has this also changed your family dynamic?
I do not have children. I have nieces and nephews. So I'm not able to speak directly to the children's piece. I know in my young onset Parkinson's community for women, the Facebook group that I'm in, I know that this question comes up periodically. I know there are some books that people have found helpful about it. I know that people have written blogs and essays and so on. So I'm sure that if you were to look on the internet for resources like that you would find them. So that's my best advice on the children piece. And again, I don't have direct experience. The family dynamics part, it's interesting. I feel very supported. I also feel like people don't know what to say to me sometimes. People ask how I am, and it's hard to get past that superficial, I'm doing fine, I'm managing, I'm still working, I'm, so on and so forth. The biggest challenge is what is it that I am capable of? So I need to manage my energy. I do have fatigue, I do have apathy. So what is it that I'm capable of doing? How much is too much in a day? Like if we're going to travel, for example, how much downtime do we need to plan into that so that I can be successful and have a good time on that journey? Even just, because I do still work full time, how much downtime do I need on a weekend after I've worked all week? Things like that are things that I've noticed are the biggest difference in my personal relationships. So it's just sort of how do you structure everything so that you can still be successful in what you want to do? I hope that helps.
Thanks. The next question posed is, your presentation assumes you do not live alone, but what if you do?
So that's an interesting point. I think if you live alone, I think you still have the opportunity to have a support system. I think that you can create, whatever you think you need. I would say look for community resources, like, for example, perhaps your church community or your spiritual community. Talk to your medical team about community resources that might be available to you. I would say participate in support groups. Find those connections where you still are able to draw on resources, even if they're not people who are living in your house. I absolutely think that within the broader community, the Parkinson's community, your medical community, your social community, I still think you have a lot of options there of places where you can draw support from.
Thank you. This next question says, there is a fine line between accepting your new reality and being your own best advocate. Accepting can lead to resignation that things will not get better. Being your best advocate can lead to denial of reality and hoping or striving for results that are not realistic. How do you navigate between the two?
That's a terrific point. There is absolutely a fine line between what is realistic and what is not. And I, as I said, I think the idea is to stay positive, to know that you are going to have limitations, but not to just resign yourself to those limitations. I honestly, the first time I showed up to do a hiking trip, I did not know if I could physically do it. So being willing to experiment and try things, you might find that you surprise yourself. So I would say, don't just say, here's my situation, here are my limitations, and therefore I can't do X or Y. I would say try it and see if there's a way that you can modify it so that you can still be successful. So yes, absolutely, you're going to have limitations. Things are going to look different. But I would say that doesn't mean that you have to just resign yourself to that. So again, I think if you are willing to experiment and if you're willing to have a positive attitude, that it's possible that you'll surprise yourself.
Do you have a regular meditation practice? Can you describe it?
I'm sporadic with meditation. I try to do a 5-minute meditation in the morning. If you go on YouTube, there are lots and lots of meditation pieces that you can pull down. I think the one I have is like a 5-minute morning meditation. And so, that's just a way to be centered and to start the day off with intention. Another book that's good if you're interested in meditation practice is called Full Catastrophe Living. And it walks you through basically a self-study version of about an 8-week program on meditation. That would be another good way to start a meditation practice. At night, I use an app called Slumber. One, it helps me sleep, and 2, there are some sleep meditations in that. Another great tool for meditation is Insight Timer. It's also an app, and there are tons and tons of different meditation options in there. So in terms of my practice, I admit that I am sporadic. I do find it helpful, and those are some of the tools that I've found that have been useful.
Okay, thank you. You included nutrition under take great care of yourself. How have you changed your diet as a result of taking care of yourself?
I used to be the queen of lean cuisine. I used to have a lean cuisine for lunch every day and sometimes for dinner. I have, for a long time, I have eliminated most processed foods. I have eliminated caffeine because it makes my tremor worse. I have eliminated alcohol because I take selegiline and my doctor says no alcohol with selegiline. And I recently in the last year, I have moved toward a more plant-based diet. And that is based on the recommendations from Dr. Lori Mishley's research. She's a naturopath in the Seattle area who focuses on Parkinson's. So those are some changes that I've made. So the biggest change is to eat real food. And then also, you know, there are lots of different people you can follow who have nutrition recommendations. Like I said, specifically, I follow Dr. Lori Mishley, who advocates a plant-based diet.
Could you please clarify the name of your hiking club? The participant is asking that you spell it out.
Sure. It's Pass to Pass. The website is passtopass.org. So PASSTOPASS.org.
Thank you. And the next question is, where are you located, and is Pass to Pass a national organization? I'd love to find a group that does some of the activities that you participate in.
Yeah, I am located in Western Washington, about 40 miles south of Seattle. Pass to Pass is based in Washington State. We do have hikers participating across the country. For example, the group that I hiked with last summer, I think of the 10 of us, there were folks from 4 different states. And we had 7 hikes last summer, and I'm not remembering exactly how many states were represented, but we definitely had people flying to Washington to hike with us. So we are based in Washington State, but we do have participants from across the country.
Okay, and I think our last question will be, what happened that motivated you to get out of bed and change your life from negative to positive?
You know, I think that I like to think that I've always had a positive outlook. I think it's really, you know, when I think about the stretch I had where I literally could not walk a square block, and you know, how did I move through that and get to where I am now? Diligence. I just kept looking for answers, and it was a frustrating journey, and there were a lot of dead end roads. But you know, I wanted to keep working. That was important to me, and I believed that it was possible for me to improve. So again, I think that attitude is important. And then, you know, once I found the path, specifically with the pain management program, you know, I was told there that I would need to be consistent for at least 8 weeks to see a difference. And I noticed a difference at 10 weeks. And so, you know, that was another practice in staying consistent and not giving up. And, you know, having faith that I was going to see a difference over time. So it really is, I think for me, it was about attitude. And again, back to that question of how do you want to feel? And at that time, I hadn't learned that piece about asking how do you want to feel. But as I reflect, you know, that still played into what I did, even though I maybe wasn't conscious about it at the time.
Many thanks, Diane, for sharing your journey with us. You will see 2 evaluation questions pop up on your screen. Please take time to answer those. Now we'll take a 15-minute break. You can use this time to view videos from our sponsors and to grab a quick beverage or snack. Thank you.
When you look at me, you might see my tremor,
My lack of facial expression.
a person with Parkinson's disease,
But you may not see that I have trouble sleeping.
that no two treatment plans are the same.
I was diagnosed at 65.
37, earlier than most.
But if you look closer,
You'll see
A warrior mom.
an endurance athlete, someone who is still dancing.
someone with a lot of fight.
Every 9 minutes, someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
And every one of them can turn to the American Parkinson Disease Association.
for education.
For community,
For support.
Look closer.
And you'll see
my resolve
My determination.
My spirit.
is
unshakable.
Visit apdaparkinson.org to learn more and show your support today.
Acadia Pharmaceuticals is the proud sponsor of this event and a committed partner to the Parkinson's community. You may be aware of the physical symptoms related to Parkinson's disease, but did you know that around half of people living with Parkinson's may also experience hallucinations and/or delusions over the course of their disease? If you or someone you care for are living with Parkinson's disease-related hallucinations and delusions, it's important to talk to your doctor. We hope you find today's event helpful, and we look forward to engaging with you face-to-face in the future.
My husband gave me this. We always said it was both of our families coming together as one.
I met Denise at my son's high school soccer game.
I knew from the first time I met him that I could marry this man.
I lost my first wife to cancer. It was hard for me.
He didn't know what was out there. He says he lucked out a second time.
I asked her to marry me, and here we are 21 years later.
Our marriage is very special to me.
It's wonderful.
I remember that day specifically. It's burned in my memory. Louis turned to me and said,
Boy, you know, you're dropping your right shoulder a bit, and you're dragging that right foot.
It was a shock. It was very frustrating.
I kind of like had a little empty feeling. Well, I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. Denise felt bad for me.
I felt it was unfair for him to have another sick wife. And I had entertained the thought of just leaving him and just going off by myself and dealing with it rather than putting him through it again. And he wouldn't have nothing to do with it. He just said, no, you're not going anywhere, honey.
I said, Denise, I love you. We'll go through this journey together.
As hard as I try to push him away at times, he's my rock. He's right there with me.
I said to her, you know, it's bad, it's Parkinson's, but you know what? Let's get meds for it, and let's just move on with life.
I took the immediate release carbidopa levodopa. Sometimes it worked very well, other times it didn't work at all. Tried Rytari when it came out, and I had a lot of bad side effects. So after 3 weeks, I was done with it.
She says, I want to get off of this. I just don't like the way it feels. I want to go back on the old medication.
I went back on the carbidopa levodopa. It was very frustrating. It was like hitting a brick wall. Six months after, my neurologist says, I wish you would go back on the Rytari and give your body time to work through the side effects that you're going through. So I agreed, and for the first 3 weeks, I was sick as a dog. Wanted to quit, and then I thought, no, he told me to hang in there. Then it started to work. So we communicated, and he was able to adjust my medication. I was so glad that I stayed with it. Taking Rytari has given me less off time than with other medication, which gives me more time during the day to do what I like to do.
We're able to plan more things in our daily lives. She doesn't let this disease bring her down.
Once you know you have Parkinson's, it's a new normal that you have to live with. And whatever makes that new normal better for you, just be in communication with your doctor. Let him know what's going on so that he can help you help yourself. It's not the end of the road. It's not. You've got a lot of good life in you. You just happen to have Parkinson's. Find what works for you, what you love to do, and do it. Keep moving.
At Adamas, the company's purpose and vision are clear. Deliver innovative medicines that make a difference for patients, caregivers, and society. Adamas is a fully integrated company focused on growing a portfolio of therapies. In 2018, Adamas successfully launched GoCovery, amantadine extended-release capsules. For more information, please visit www.gocovery.com.
My name is Suzanne Friedman. I was pretty much raised in Florida. I got married at 27 and to a wonderful husband, and a few years later we had 2 great kids. I started noticing like my left leg started like shivering a little bit. I used to ask my husband all the time, "Do you notice anything on my leg?" And he'd say no. I went to the doctor finally for my annual checkup, and I said to my doctor, "You know, I have this kind of strange shiver in my leg." She said, "Well, it's probably a pinched nerve." So she sent me to a neurologist who then diagnosed me with Parkinson's disease. Every time I would go see my doctor, he would give me new medicines or tell me about something that was coming up, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting for that medicine to make me feel better. I'm tired of waiting. I'm watching the years go by. I need to do something now because I wasn't living life the way I wanted to. And that's when I started researching DBS. I wasn't ready to throw in the towel. I got involved with boxing because I knew that it was another source of exercise specifically relating to Parkinson's. Everybody that does this boxing program has Parkinson's, so we all are in the same boat. We might not have the same symptoms, but everybody's dealing with the same issues, and it's more than just boxing. It's a camaraderie and a community. There were 3 reasons I chose Boston Scientific. The first reason was the size. And I felt very comfortable that it was a very small size and it wouldn't show. And I had seen people that had other devices that stuck out of their chest. And mine, I could wear a bathing suit with it and nobody would notice. The second reason was the technology. Even though it's new to the United States, it had the modern and most up-to-date technology. And I thought to myself, who would get a computer that was 20 years old? And the third reason was the battery life. I don't want to go through another surgery until I have to, and I know this device is going to last me a good 15 years. Life before DBS was a struggle. Every morning when I woke up, I didn't know what was going to happen for the day. Between the inconsistency of the medicine and my symptoms, now I know I have consistency. I don't have to worry about whether my medicine works, whether it's not going to work, when I have to eat, when the next medicine's due. I was living my life around the medicine. And DBS has totally changed my life.
When you look at me, you might see
my tremor,
my lack of facial expression,
a person with Parkinson's disease.
But you may not see that I have trouble sleeping,
that no 2 treatment plans are the same.
I was diagnosed at 65.
37, earlier than most.
But if you look closer,
you'll see
a warrior mom,
an endurance athlete, someone who is still dancing,
someone with a lot of fight.
Every 9 minutes, someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
And every one of them can turn to the American Parkinson Disease Association.
For education.
For community.
For support.
Look closer.
And you'll see.
My resolve.
My determination.
My spirit
is unshakable.
Visit apdaparkinson.org to learn more and show your support today.
Acadia Pharmaceuticals is the proud sponsor of this event and a committed partner to the Parkinson's community. You may be aware of the physical symptoms related to Parkinson's disease, but did you know that around half of people living with Parkinson's may also experience hallucinations and/or delusions over the course of their disease? If you or someone you care for are living with Parkinson's disease-related hallucinations and delusions, it's important to talk to your doctor. We hope you find today's event helpful, and we look forward to engaging with you face-to-face in the future.
My husband gave me this. We always said it was both of our families coming together as one.
I met Denise at my son's high school soccer game.
I knew from the first time I met him that I could marry this man.
I lost my first wife to cancer. It was hard for me.
He didn't know what was out there. He says he lucked out a second time.
I asked her to marry me, and here we are 21 years later.
Our marriage is very special to me.
It's wonderful.
I remember that day specifically. It's burned in my memory. Louis turned to me and said,
"Boy, you know, you're dropping your right shoulder a bit, and you're dragging that right foot."
It was a shock. It was very frustrating.
I kind of had a little empty feeling. Well, I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. Denise felt bad for me.
I felt it was unfair for him to have another sick wife. And I had entertained the thought of just leaving him and just going off by myself and dealing with it rather than putting him through it again. And he wouldn't have nothing to do with it. He just said, "No, you're not going anywhere, honey."
I said, "Denise, I love you. We'll go through this journey together."
As hard as I try to push him away at times, he's my rock. He's right there with me.
I said to her, you know, it's bad, it's Parkinson's, but you know what? Let's get meds for it, and let's just move on with life.
I took the immediate release carbidopa levodopa. Sometimes it worked very well, other times it didn't work at all. Tried Rytary when it came out, and I had a lot of bad side effects. So after 3 weeks, I was done with it.
She says, "I want to get off of this. I just don't like the way it feels. I want to go back on the old medication."
I went back on the carbidopa levodopa. It was very frustrating. It was like hitting a brick wall. Six months after, my neurologist says, "I wish you would go back on the Rytary and give your body time to work through the side effects that you're going through." So I agreed, and for the first 3 weeks I was sick as a dog. Wanted to quit, and then I thought, no, he told me to hang in there. Then it started to work. So we communicated, and he was able to adjust my medication. I was so glad that I stayed with it. Taking Rytary has given me less off time than with other medication, which gives me more time during the day to do what I like to do.
We're able to plan more things in our daily lives. She doesn't let this disease bring her down.
Once you know you have Parkinson's, it's a new normal that you have to live with. And whatever makes that new normal better for you, just be in communication with your doctor. Let him know what's going on so that he can help you help yourself. It's not the end of the road. It's not. You've got a lot of good life in you. You just happen to have Parkinson's. Find what works for you, what you love to do, and do it. Keep moving.
At Adamas, the company's purpose and vision are clear. Deliver innovative medicines that make a difference for patients, caregivers, and society. Adamas is a fully integrated company focused on growing a portfolio of therapies. In 2018, Adamas successfully launched GoCovery, amantadine extended-release capsules. For more information, please visit www.gocovery.com.
My name is Suzanne Friedman. I was pretty much raised in Florida. I got married at 27 and to a wonderful husband, and a few years later we had 2 great kids. I started noticing like my left leg started like shivering a little bit. I used to ask my husband all the time, do you notice anything on my leg? And he'd say no. I went to the doctor finally for my annual checkup, and I said to my doctor, I have this kind of strange shiver in my leg. She said, well, it's probably a pinched nerve. So she sent me to a neurologist who then diagnosed me with Parkinson's disease. Every time I would go see my doctor, he would give me new medicines or tell me about something that was coming up, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting for that medicine to make me feel better. I'm tired of waiting. I'm watching the years go by. I need to do something now because I wasn't living life the way I wanted to. And that's when I started researching DBS. I wasn't ready to throw in the towel. I got involved with boxing because I knew that it was another source of exercise specifically relating to Parkinson's. Everybody that does this boxing program has Parkinson's, so we all are in the same boat. We might not have the same symptoms, but everybody's dealing with the same issues, and it's more than just boxing. It's a camaraderie and a community. There were 3 reasons I chose Boston Scientific. The first reason was the size. And I felt very comfortable that it was a very small size and it wouldn't show. And I had seen people that had other devices that stuck out of their chest. And mine, I could wear a bathing suit with it and nobody would notice. The second reason was the technology. Even though it's new to the United States, it had the modern and most up-to-date technology. And I thought to myself, who would get a computer that was 20 years old? And the third reason was the battery life. I don't want to go through another surgery until I have to, and I know this device is going to last me a good 15 years. Life before DBS was a struggle. Every morning when I woke up, I didn't know what was going to happen for the day. Between the inconsistency of the medicine and my symptoms, now I know I have consistency. I don't have to worry about whether my medicine works, whether it's not going to work, when I have to eat, when the next medicine's due. I was living my life around the medicine. And DBS has totally changed my life.
Welcome back. The next presentation is on managing PD medications from Dr. Lisa Schuirman. Remember to use the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen to type in questions for the question and answer session at the end of the talk. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you and talk to you about managing Parkinson's disease medications. So let's talk about managing your medications for PD. If I was going to make a slide that had all the names of all the medications in Parkinson's disease, it would be really very complex and difficult to read. So I didn't make that kind of a slide. I will be talking about, in general, all of the different medications that we use in Parkinson's disease. But let me just focus for a moment on the most common medication, which, as you know, is carbidopa levodopa. And I just want to focus on that for a moment because it goes by many different names and it may be somewhat confusing. Sometimes people refer to it kind of shorthand saying just L-dopa, but it's also known as Sinemet. Sinemet was the original trade name, and levodopa first came out long ago, I think maybe around 1960s, maybe 1970. So the trade name is still used, but obviously we mostly see generic preparations. Now, you may also hear it referred to as either the IR, immediate release form, or the CR, or ER, controlled release or extended release forms. A newer preparation is called Ritari. And Ritari is a very interesting preparation. These are capsules with pellets inside, and they have interesting properties. Some are immediate, some are intermediate, and some are extended release. That's what Ritari, the preparation is, the newer one. Another fairly new preparation is called Stalevo. Stalevo is a combination of carbidopa levodopa and entacapone. And then there is a very recent, probably the most recent on this list, preparation called Inbrija, which is a levodopa inhalation powder used for kind of like a rescue when people are having a bad off time. So what's also important to know is right there at the top of the slide, When we talk about levodopa, we're really talking about some combination of carbidopa and levodopa. Levodopa is the active ingredient, and carbidopa is inside each pill or capsule because that helps to reduce a common side effect of potential nausea. Okay, so the format of the talk is going to be a series of slides, each one asking common questions that people often ask us. So the first question is, should I avoid starting or increasing Parkinson's meds for as long as possible? And this is a really key question in our field. You know, it isn't an easy question to answer. Instead, it has a lot to do with the art of medical practice, if you will. Because for one thing, one can start Parkinson's medication potentially too early. One can also start it too late. You might start it too early if there really aren't any troubling symptoms, because we shouldn't really use our medications when they're not necessary. We don't want to overtreat anybody. So when we want to wait till people have a troubling symptom, something that disrupts their daily life before starting Parkinson's medications. Now, it's also possible to start medications too late. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we see people who are so bent on and focused on not starting medications that they wait for so long that they are significantly disabled. And that's really a mistake as well. The point is that we want to do our best at every step to optimize your function, your daily function, and your quality of life. And we use all the tools in our toolbox to do that the best way we can. Okay, this next one isn't quite a question. It's sometimes we actually hear people say, because they haven't brought in their medication list, they might say, I'm just taking a little white pill. Do you know which one that is? Well, no, there's no way we can know what you're taking unless you come in with a great list that lists not only all the medicines, but also the tablet sizes and the dosages and your dosing regimen, how often you take it during the day, even the times of the day that you take it. We rely on that to do the best possible job for each of our patients. If we don't have that kind of information, it's a complete black box, and you're not going to get an expert quality recommendation at the end of your visit. So make sure, it's one of the key things, always bring in a detailed medication list to every physician appointment. Is it important to take my PD medications on time? Okay, well, this is a very interesting question, and also isn't a simple yes/no answer. The first thing I would ask you, each of you, to think about is how aware you are when you don't take your medication on time, because some people in the early years of Parkinson's disease, but also possibly somewhat later, they have a completely smooth response from their medications throughout the day. And other people find that they're very aware of times where their medicines are wearing off. This is important in answering this question, because if you're one of the people who don't notice your medicines wearing off during the day, it's pretty likely that if you weren't exactly on time, if you took your medicine, let's say the dose was an hour late, you might not notice much of a difference. On the other hand, if you're in that other group and you are very, very aware of when your medications wear off, in that case, keeping on-time scheduling is going to be very important to you. And, you know, doing things to stay on time, like setting an alarm, any cue that you can use to stay on time is going to be important to maintain a good response during the day. Sometimes when I ask people, do you notice any wearing off? Their answer is, if I take my medicine on time, I don't. What should I do if I miss a dose? Okay, so you don't need to panic at all if you miss a dose of a Parkinson's disease medication. And in some ways, this question is overlapping or similar to what we were just talking about, because if you have a smooth response from your Parkinson's medications and you don't notice any wearing off, when you miss a dose, it may not make much of a difference. That doesn't mean that you could just stop taking your medicine and it wouldn't make a difference, but just the one single dose miss wouldn't have a big effect. On the other hand, if you do notice wearing off of medications, it's likely by missing a single dose that it would cause more disruption and more difficulties, more symptoms coming back during the day. So overall, a good way to think about it is, if you're a little past the dosing time, maybe within an hour of the dosing time, then you should take your dose and move the other doses up during the day. On the other hand, if somehow you missed it completely for some reason, no reason to panic, you can just get back on your schedule. Can I take extra doses of levodopa as needed? Well, the fact is that some people do use that strategy, that if they're going to have an unusually long day, they might take an extra half to 1 tablet of Cinnamate, for example, for the evening hours where in most evenings they're just sort of sitting and relaxing in front of the TV set, but there may be a night they're getting out and they feel that they need that extra boost to get through later hours with mobility. On the other hand, we have to exercise caution here, because sometimes we don't want anybody to get into a habit of popping extra doses frequently. If that's happening, it means that your medication schedule isn't right and needs to be adjusted. And it also gets back to that issue of going, when you see your movement disorders neurologist, giving good information about what you're doing so that the doctor can do the best job possible at adjusting your schedule. So if somebody says that once or twice a week, they take an extra half tablet to get them through a evening program, as I mentioned, then, that sounds perfectly fine. If they say that most days of the week they're doing it, then I will take that seriously and think they need a medication adjustment overall. So this patient says, I'm worried about drug interactions. And, many of the people we see are taking a long, long list of medications, not just for Parkinson's disease. I mean, overall, it's pretty fortunate that there isn't a lot of adverse bad drug interactions between the Parkinson's medications and other common classes of drugs. Lots of our patients are also taking medicines for common problems like blood pressure or heartburn, GERD, or maybe heart problems or COPD or diabetes. And more often than not, there isn't any problem with interactions between our drugs and those kinds of drugs. But it is very important for us to be aware of all the drugs you're taking, because there are some exceptions. For example, there are some medications that actually have direct effects on the dopamine system. Those drugs may very well be a problem for a Parkinson's patient and have an interaction with our drugs for Parkinson's disease. Another issue is when medicines you're taking are a contributory factor to symptoms that we are commonly treating in Parkinson's disease. And things that come to mind right now would be things like sleep problems, constipation, fatigue, cognitive problems, difficulty with feeling lightheaded when you stand up, dizzy when you stand up, all of those things can have contributions from other kinds of drugs. And in order to treat you properly, we need to understand fully everything you're taking. Many people say that they're concerned about generic drugs and are interested about whether the drugs, the original preparation, drugs from the original pharmaceutical company, are they better than the generic preparations? Well, you know, really the horse is out of the barn in terms of generic preparations, because most of us are taking generic drugs. And we don't have a tremendous amount of control over that anymore, because insurers, for obvious reasons, prefer to pay for generic drugs, which are less expensive than the original trade name preparations. I mean, it is true that generic preparations are not identical to the original preparation. For example, the generic preparations are FDA approved by the Federal Drug Administration. However, they don't have to be identical. They can be within 15% or above and below the level of effectiveness of the original drug. So they may be a little less strong and they may be a little stronger. Also, the generic preparations have different types of fillers. Your tablets are, in order to stay together in a nice tablet size, have fillers in them that will hold that shape. And the fillers are not necessarily the same from one preparation to another. And of course, you also see that the colors are different when you get a different generic preparation. So there are differences between generic drugs and the original trade name drug. However, in the large majority of cases, in large majority of patients, that doesn't make a difference. It can occasionally, rarely, I should say, make a difference. Here's an interesting question. Do you use your medication up when you exercise? Do you use your Parkinson's medication up when you're doing strenuous exercise at work? In other words, do you need more medication when you exercise and need less when you're sedentary? Well, that's kind of intuitive, but studies thus far do not support this. In other words, the answer is no. Studies that have looked at the medication that people need when they're doing strenuous exercise compared to being a couch potato do not support that more medication is needed or less medication for sedentary habits. Are there any tips on managing Parkinson's medications when hospitalized or undergoing medical procedures? Well, as a matter of fact, yes, there are. So first of all, I mean, a very common situation is when people are having a medical procedure and they're told to not eat anything before the procedure. So this gets back to the same thing we talked about before about how much you are aware that your medicines wear off if you skip a dose. For some people, skipping even just the morning dose means the difference between being able to walk or not, basically. That's how extreme it may be for certain people. Other people, they can miss it and feel perfectly fine. They don't need that first dose of the day. So keep that in mind. If you're one of the people who knows they can miss a dose without a problem, this isn't likely to cause you an issue when you need to not eat before a medical procedure. For those who do have issues, I encourage you to speak to the physician or nurse who's helping you prepare for the procedure and make sure that you're unable to take your Parkinson's medication. Remember that your levodopa is the most potent medication of all your medicines. So the discussion might be, if you say you're on 2, 3, or 4 Parkinson's medicines, you might say, could I possibly just take my levodopa? Is that possible? And if they say no, if you're in that group of people who notice they lose a lot of mobility when they don't take their medicine, then it's important to explain that to the clinicians who are going to be helping you through that procedure so they could plan for that. Well, how about if you are hospitalized? Certainly not an uncommon situation. How do you manage your Parkinson's medicines there? Well, the common problem that our patients encounter is that oftentimes our medication schedules are complex and people are taking medicines at very specific times of the day. And this does not align with the hospital routines. Nurses may be unable to give you your medicines at the precise times that you're accustomed to taking them. So one of the things, if you're in the group of people who cannot vary your schedule a lot, then one of the things you might suggest and ask about when you're hospitalized, and this would be mainly if you have a family member or friend or support system who'll be with you in the hospital, to ask whether you can keep your medicines at your bedside table and that you or your significant others will help you with administering them during the day. That's something to keep in mind. Okay, next question is it better to take a combination of Parkinson's medications or to take only levodopa? So, like so many other of the questions, there isn't a single answer. One shoe doesn't fit all. And we have a lot of different Parkinson's medications. I already mentioned that levodopa is the most potent medication. There's a general kind of a rule that younger patients, younger people, tend to tolerate more medications, more combinations of medications better than people as they age. People as they age tend to be more prone to medication side effects. Because of that, most Parkinson's physicians use simpler regimens, maybe only levodopa, in their older patients. When I say older is relative, but we're talking about let's say after 70. On the other hand, and then conversely, they may use all the different medications we have in our toolbox in combination more often in the younger patient. But that is not, tried and true. After all, many of our patients are aging over time as we follow them over a period of 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and many of them end up at age 70, 75 on complex regimens of combinations. They're tolerating them perfectly fine, and most physicians would not discontinue them unless some problem developed. All of these different medications that are on the market for Parkinson's disease all have their uses. And we can oftentimes, when they're well tolerated, use these medicines in combination to really fine-tune things better and achieve the best possible result. But there are other people, other clinicians who believe strongly that they get the best results with the simplest regimen of levodopa alone. So you find quite a bit of variability when you go see different Parkinson's neurologists. Okay, here's another thing that people commonly say. They look at the list of side effects and they say, boy, this looks scary. And it's true that if you look at the package inserts for medications, the information the pharmacy gives you when they give you your medications, if you do searches online, and if you listen to stories from your friends who are taking these medications, it turns out to be very intimidating. There's no doubt. Keep in mind that everybody is very, very different. And some of the very medicines that you're taking, somebody else with Parkinson's disease had a really difficult time with and cannot take it all. So this is a very, very individual issue when you ask about whether side effects are a problem. Another thing is that when you look at things like package inserts and information from your pharmacy and these online searches, you oftentimes can turn up extremely long lists of side effects. And when you see those super long lists, that is generally information that came from the drug trials and oftentimes includes most of what the hundreds of people in those trials said they were experiencing. There isn't necessarily a clear relationship between every one of those side effects and the drug, but because somebody experienced that, or a certain maybe 3% of the group experienced it, it ends up on a list. So keep that in mind, that the list of side effects that look so long and scary may not actually be of real concern. We always keep our eye out for side effects, and we're always very interested in everything you have to say about what you think is going on in terms of your side effects. Okay, the next question. Should I take my medications before or after meals? So, well, I'm sure you're not going to be surprised to hear me say there's more than one answer to this question too. There are some people who take their medications, and particularly now we can talk about levodopa, because carbidopa-levodopa can be one of the most common side effects of carbidopa-levodopa can be nausea or GI upset. So, but yet there are loads of people who are taking levodopa, taking Sinemet, and never had any nausea or GI upset. The majority, in fact, take it without a problem. So if you're one of those people who never have any problem with nausea or GI upset, you can take it either before or after a meal. It's not going to make a difference. And in fact, before the meal is probably better, because when you don't have food in your stomach, your medications are absorbed from your GI tract more quickly. There's no competition from food. On the other hand, it's exactly the opposite for the person who tends to get nauseous from levodopa. Even though carbidopa is in the pill to reduce nausea, some people still feel nauseous. If that's true, you're going to do better to take your pill on a full stomach. So in that case, take your pills after the meal, even though they're not going to be quite as well digested or absorbed, I should say. They're going to do a good enough job for sure. Many of our patients take their levodopa and other medicines on a full stomach to avoid GI upset, and they get great benefit from the medicines, no problems. Okay, here's an interesting thing we hear from our patients. I can't tell if I'm on or off. And what we mean by that, and what they mean by that, is they can't tell if they're having an on period when their medicines are working, or an off period when their medicines don't have a good effect, have no benefit potentially. So the reason why that can be an issue is because your Parkinson's neurologist are oftentimes going to ask you if you're having wearing off of your medication effect. And it's important for us to know that, because that's one of the ways we know that you may or may not need more medication at that point. So how can you tell if you're on or off? Well, you need to become a really good observer. Sometimes it even requires keeping a diary of what your symptoms are like before you take your pill, and what your symptoms are like an hour or so later. And look for certain symptoms that are best relieved by your medication when you're on, by your on period. So what are some examples? For some people, not all unfortunately, their tremor responds well to their medications, or their medication like, say, levodopa, and therefore they can use their tremor as a guide, very easy guide because it's so observable, to see whether their medicines are working and whether they're on. Obviously, the tremor would be relieved when they're on and would come back when they're off. Not everybody has a tremor, and not everybody has tremor relief from their medicine. What else can you do to tell whether you're on or off? Well, for some people, it might be that they see a big difference in how the ease with which they can get up from a chair or get in and out of a car or walk. They see a difference in their overall mobility. So one way to do it is to actually see if you can get up out of a chair. If you can pop right up in the best possible way, well, that's your on period. Maybe you can do it without even pushing off with the arms. If you find that you have to push off from the arms or you fall back in the chair, that may be your off time. Other people, when they're off, when their medicines aren't working, they don't walk as well. They begin to shuffle or even have a freezing spell where their feet stick to the floor. So look for those signs that for each individual person define on versus off, and you can use it as a guide to report good information, very helpful to your movement disorder neurologist. I heard I should avoid protein when taking Parkinson's disease medications. Okay, this kind of gets back to the issue we were talking before about taking medicine on a full stomach or not, or an empty stomach. But there is a specific story about protein in your diet. Now, it almost has no bearing, it really has no bearing on people who are early in Parkinson's disease or even in a middle stage. It's most likely that this becomes important in people who are in more advanced stages, having more problems with these on and off periods. When you're having more and more problems with these on and off periods, getting proper benefit from each dose, every change that is going to diminish the absorption of your Parkinson's medications, your levodopa, is going to cause problems, make a difference. So here's the underlying story here that you want to know, and that is that levodopa itself and protein in your diet compete for absorption from the GI tract. Now, protein is found in many foods. Obviously, protein foods include meat, fish, dairy, eggs. So there's lots and lots of protein in all of our diet. So it's not such an easy problem. What we do and what we advise when people say, and again, this is something you can figure out on your own. See, sometimes people come in and say, sometimes I take a pill and it doesn't seem to help me at all. It's like it's a missed dose, even though I took the dose. So one question that your Parkinson's neurologist may ask you is, well, have you ever noticed what happens if you have a high protein meal, like say maybe a bacon and eggs for breakfast, or a hamburger for lunch, or a turkey sandwich for lunch? Have you ever noticed that those are the times where you feel like that missed dose effect occurred? If you notice that, then we know we need to consider protein as a problem. And then we use something called the protein redistribution diet, which simply means that you reduce the amount of protein in your breakfast and lunch and place the protein, position the protein in your dinner meal. Most people need to be less active after dinner. And so obviously we all need protein in our diet. You can't eliminate it. But by redistributing it to dinner, you can improve your function throughout the day. Okay, here's a hard question. When I travel, how should I handle a change of the time zone? Okay, well, if it's a changing just one or two time zones, so it's just a matter of an hour or so, well, then it's an obvious matter of just simply nudging the whole schedule in that direction by an hour or two. Of course, when people cross many time zones and travel internationally, this can really be a problem. Just like I said before, I'm sorry I sound like a broken record, but like I said before, the fact is that if you can miss a dose and generally not notice a problem, it's not going to be too difficult for you to just space things out somewhat differently, even though you've crossed many time zones. Let's say you took an airplane to Europe. Well, that's a 5, 6, 7 hour difference, depending on where you go. So, if you don't notice a lot of fluctuations of performance during the day, and you could even miss a pill at home and not have a problem, well, in that case, you can just sort of resume your schedule, take a pill while you're on the flight, a dose or two, and then resume your doses when you get where you're going. Obviously, that first day, your schedule is going to end up being messed up somewhat. There's really no way fully around that. But you'll need to be kind of careful to take enough medication to keep you properly mobile and functioning, especially if you experience a lot of off symptoms. Well, okay, that brings me to the close of this presentation. I hope that it begins to do a reasonable job of helping you with some of the questions that are on your mind, but I'm sure I didn't get to all of your questions. So I hope that you've already been entering some of your questions in the Q&A question box, and I will be looking forward to answering them. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hello, Dr. Schuirman, and thank you for your talk. The first question is, do the medications help with tremor?
Okay, hi everybody, and great to see everyone. So the fact is that tremor can be kind of tricky. First of all, I want to state from the outset that not all patients with Parkinson's disease have tremor, and certainly not all patients with Parkinson's disease have serious or disabling tremor. When tremor is a problem, however, we oftentimes, it's a matter of whether we're going to use standard medications like L-Dopa or other medicines, or sometimes we use medicines that are more targeted for the tremor itself, such as some of you may be on or have heard of the drug called trihexyphenidyl, which is a mouthful, also known as Artane. A drug like trihexyphenidyl is mostly used for tremor itself and tends to be a little harder for people who are older to take, a little better tolerated by people who are younger. The common medications for Parkinson's disease, whether we're talking about L-Dopa or other common classes of medication, such as, for example, ropinirole is a dopamine agonist, rasagiline is an MEO inhibitor. We have different kinds of classes. I mean, by and large, the main out of all those drugs, the one that's most helpful potentially for tremor is L-Dopa. And in some cases, it works, terrifically. And the patient is extremely pleased with the response for tremor. And it's an oddity that there are other times where levodopa is effective for the overall slowness and stiffness of Parkinson's disease, and yet has minimal, even no, effect on tremor. So it's an individualized kind of a problem, and we have to, like so many other things in Parkinson's care, treat it in a very personalized manner.
The next question is there a time when PD patients are no longer responsive to carbidopa, levodopa? 5, 10, 20 years? Is this inevitable?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I should have really put it on my original list. So there is we call it a mythology or a neuromythology that levodopa stops working over the course of the Parkinson's disease progression. It sort of makes most people think that there's a matter of developing a tolerance to the medication, such that it would be important to avoid taking medicine for as long as you can so that you would get more bang for your buck when you need it, so to speak. But that is a myth, really, because levodopa will continue to be effective for Parkinson's symptoms throughout one's life. for as long as you need it. However, the disease itself does progress. There's symptomatic progression, such that the symptoms that you have in early stage Parkinson's disease are more mild, and then the symptoms become more difficult, more severe, moderate, then more severe as the disease progresses. And therefore, it can be more difficult to achieve the same degree of relief as the symptoms themselves become more advanced. There are also more advanced complications of the disease, some of which we've talked about during my talk, such as the fluctuations, the on and off periods. Other things begin to be an issue. So the main problem, the bottom line is the main problem is that as Parkinson's disease advances and as the changes in the brain become more advanced, that is the reason why the levodopa doesn't work as well as time goes on. Not that it is ineffective. It continues to work, and you do not develop tolerance to L-dopa or other anti-Parkinsonian medications.
The next question is, this participant asks about the medication entacapone. She says it's a new addition for her, and she's concerned about the long-term effects on the kidneys. Is there any research to address that concern?
Okay, so thank you for your question. And entacapone, which goes by the trade name of Comtan, or is sometimes inside a combination pill with carbidopa levodopa known as Stalevo. So if you may be receiving it under any of those names. Basically what entacapone does is it inhibits an enzyme known as COMT that degrades, chews up, metabolizes levodopa. So when you take a COMT inhibitor like entacapone, then the amount of levodopa that gets to your brain is enhanced, actually by about 10 to 15%. So that is what you hope to get from entacapone. As far as the specific question about kidneys, there isn't any specific guidance to be monitoring kidney function during entacapone use. We don't actually monitor kidney function with any of our standard medications. So I don't know if the questioner happens to have a particular renal or kidney problem, and that's why they've asked the question. Obviously, if somebody has kidney function problems, they will need monitoring of their kidneys overall. But I don't know what it says under the package insert of entacapone, but there's no specific concern that we follow for monitoring or tracking.
I feel best early in the morning without taking any medicine. Why is that?
So we hear that from a subgroup of our patients, and that's an interesting phenomenon. You know, again, this just goes to show how individualized Parkinson's disease is. And I think our keynote speaker spoke to that as well. Because, you know, there are some people who their specific problem is that when they get up first thing in the morning, their mobility is poor and they have trouble even getting dressed and caring for themselves. Whereas there are other people who say what Des just asked in the question, which is that they say, I feel my best first thing in the morning when I wake up, even before I take a pill. So we see those two different patterns, and it's not entirely clear why that occurs so differently in different people. As far as this aspect of feeling better, however, it's been studied, it's been described, and it even has a special name called sleep refreshment. The idea being that for some people, the actual night's sleep seems to be kind of a reboot, and even without medication, they feel better. And we do hear some people say that they don't need any medication the first thing when they wake up. It does pose a dilemma because some of those people then will understandably not take their first dose until later in the morning. You always want to be careful in those situations that you don't wait until you start to feel worse or much worse, which would indicate that the any levels of medications from the previous day have really dipped down low. And now when you take your first dose, it's going to have a hard time overcoming that deep trough, if you understand the metaphor I'm using here. So in other words, even for people who feel a sense of sleep refreshment, they feel their best first thing in the morning, it's not a good idea to wait until you start to feel worse to take your first dose. You might nudge it forward a little bit, but I wouldn't wait until things start to go into a downturn.
I take a lot of meds throughout the day. It is very easy to lose track. Any recommendations to help manage?
Well, there's many ways that people go about this. And it is very true that, Parkinson's disease is distinguished by, especially in the more advanced patient, to be on very complex medication regimens. We even have patients who take medicines not only every 3 hours a day, sometimes even every 2.5 or even every 2 hours. There's no way, even when you have just a 3 times a day schedule, it's very difficult in the course of your normal busy day to recall that it's time to take a dose. So, if you just take medicine first thing in the morning or before you go to sleep, that is certainly an easy schedule most people can remember. But as soon as you add those middle of the day doses, almost everybody would start to miss doses. So you'll have to find your own individual strategy. Obviously, lots of our patients are using various forms of timers and alarms, and they're oftentimes going off when we're seeing patients. So I know people use those regularly. Of course, one of the things that I think is a problem with that strategy is that if you don't have some water with you and the pills with you when the alarm goes off, then it's very likely that you're not going to remember even 10 minutes later that the alarm went off and it's time to take your pill. So you could still miss it, even though you had an alarm and you tried very hard to be proactive. So I think that, obviously there are all sorts of medication boxes. There are some very fancy, more high-tech medication containers that have alarms and, assist you and facilitate administration overall. But the bottom line is that some sort of alarm for in the middle of the day doses is going to be, I think, your best bet. I'd like to bring up one other issue there, and that is individuals that we see who have memory problems. Because if you have a memory problem, then, it's good to be, again, thinking proactively, and you're going to be more at risk for forgetting your doses. And so your support system needs to sort of brainstorm with you, well, how are you going to make sure that you get those doses, even when you are alone and there isn't a care partner around to give you a reminder. So it's a matter of being proactive, and it's important because I hope you got the sense from the previous part where I was going through the slides that timing of the medication can be important for many people, and that if you let a dose just slide, it's likely that you will have, for those who experience wearing off symptoms, a period of worse wearing off than you would have otherwise.
I'm taking carbidopa, levodopa, 25-100. Why are there 2 names and 2 numbers? What does that mean?
Good question. So basically, levodopa is the active ingredient that we need for anti-Parkinsonian effects in the carbidopa-levodopa pill. So why is carbidopa in the pill? Well, interestingly, in the very beginning, when levodopa was first discovered, levodopa was used alone, without the carbidopa. And the most common side effect I mentioned before of nausea was a pretty severe problem. And not only that, but very high doses of levodopa were needed because lots of the levodopa was not making it into the brain. And so you had to give loads and loads of levodopa. Of course, that made the nausea even worse. And that's just the way it was for the first couple of years. Then it was discovered that if you added carbidopa to the pill, carbidopa is another type of a enzyme inhibitor, and it promotes the absorption of levodopa from the GI tract. And from that perspective, allowed us to give much lower doses of levodopa. And carbidopa also had the effect overall of reducing nausea by a long shot. So there are some people who still have nausea, even though they're taking carbidopa, levodopa. And in some of those cases, we actually prescribe additional carbidopa. So that's one of the strategies to manage nausea. If they may not be getting enough in their pills, especially when they're taking low doses. As far as those numbers go, it's a fraction, as you can see, the most common being 25/100. And the 100 is the levodopa. The 25 is the carbidopa. In other words, carbidopa, levodopa 25/100 is 25 milligrams of carbidopa and 100 milligrams of levodopa.
Okay, and our last question will be, my friend and I were diagnosed with Parkinson's around the same time and were started on the same medication. I'm taking twice as much medicine as he is. Does that mean I'm doing worse or my disease is progressing faster?
Of course, it's always difficult without really knowing the individual patients and knowing the full history, but I'll answer the question in general by saying that, for one thing, one of the common issues in our field of caring for Parkinson's patients is the difficulty of identifying the actual time of onset of symptoms. When did this problem really begin? So people vary quite a bit in their ability to peg that down. And there's lots of reasons for that. It seems like it may be somewhat easier when people have tremor of a hand as an early symptom because it's such an obvious thing to notice. It's harder to notice that you are gradually getting slower. And so, those kinds of things, it could take a long time to pick up on. We suspect that there are some people we see that even though they think their symptoms began in the last year, that their symptoms could have began years before, maybe 5 years before, for example. And another aspect of the timing, or making it another obstacle to timing things right, is the aspect of changes that occur anyway as people age. So it's more likely in older people that they will shrug off the onset of Parkinson's symptoms thinking it's simply aging. They're slowing down because they're aging. They're having more difficulty getting out of a chair because they're aging. They're even having a tremor because they're aging. So those are some factors that cause people to not know the time of when they started their actual symptoms. This results in a very big difference amongst our patients about when they are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and start their medicine relative to when their symptoms really began. So one of the more common explanations for the scenario that the questioner asks is that one person really did have their symptoms begin within the last year, and another person had their symptoms begin several years before. And that would lead to, in most cases, one person needing more medication than another, even though they were diagnosed at similar times. So that's one explanation that is a likely one for that scenario.
Thank you, Dr. Schulman, for your time. Now we will have Christina come to explain the next portion of our program.
Okay, so now we've come to the part of the program for the breakout sessions. You have two options. You can either attend the exercise sessions, which include an extended session of chair yoga and a walking marching session, or you can attend the benefits of improv for PD session. The choice is yours, but you cannot attend both an exercise session and the improv session. You must attend one or the other. To join a session, click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and you will see a link to click on, which will take you to the breakout session videos. If for some reason you're not able to click on the link for the Q&A icon, please check your email, as the link was also sent to you via email. The next thing I want to say is very important. Do not close this window tab on your computer that you are watching me on right now. Please leave it open, because once you are done with the breakout session, you will click this window tab to come back to join the main Zoom webinar to hear Dr. Rich's talk. Also, I want to tell you that in a few seconds you will see some polling questions for Dr. Schuirman's talk. Please take time to answer those 2 questions, and I hope you have fun in the breakout sessions. Thank you. Welcome back. Now we'll move on to the last presentation of the day by Dr. Stephen Rich on non-motor symptoms of PD. Remember to use the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen to type questions you would like Dr. Rich to address during the question and answer session at the end of his presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you just let me know that you can see my slides? Just give me a thumbs up there. Christina, I assume that you can. And well, good. Welcome, everyone. It's a little odd to be giving a talk to my computer, but that's the course of things today. And I'm going to be talking about non-motor symptoms in Parkinson's. I'm going to go a little fast, and I'm going to be a little short on detail because I want to cover the spectrum of the symptoms, and we can have a little time for Q&A. It might be cut short because I'm still here in the clinic today. Let's see if I can advance my slides. And for some reason, there we go. So just to go back, we're all familiar with the most overt signs of Parkinson's disease, which are motor, such as slowness of movement, which is the hallmark of Parkinson's, tremor, rigidity, and imbalance. And those symptoms and signs often draw the greatest attention. But it's important to appreciate that there are many non-motor symptoms in Parkinson's disease, and they're often overlooked. These are common. Either you or your physician may not even know that they're part of Parkinson's. They're frequently missed or undiagnosed. Like the motor symptoms, they can be a significant source of distress, affect quality of life, and sometimes they're more disabling than the motor symptoms. You're very familiar with the fact that motor symptoms may fluctuate, kind of a roller coaster effect, but sometimes the non-motor symptoms can fluctuate as well. They're often treatable, and they can either be due to Parkinson's or the treatment for Parkinson's, and we always have to make sure that there's not some other explanation. We can broadly define the non-motor symptoms into kind of 4 large categories. Autonomic symptoms. The autonomic nervous system is that part of the nervous system that we have little or less control over, bowels, bladder, etc., blood pressure control. Sensory symptoms, neuropsychiatric, sleep-related, and a few others, and I'm going to go through these. We'll start off by talking about autonomic symptoms in Parkinson's. This includes constipation, overactive bladder, orthostatic blood pressure, hypotension, which refers to low blood pressure with standing, sweating, drooling, sexual dysfunction. I won't talk about seborrhea today, but some people with Parkinson's do get some crustiness around the wrinkles in the face or around the ears, which is pretty common in Parkinson's disease and treatable. Constipation. With constipation, the key thing is it's not always necessary to have a bowel movement daily. It is important, though, to have a regular bowel movement. So regularity is more important than frequency. Whenever someone is having a problem with constipation, a careful look at medications, particularly those that are so-called anticholinergic. That is, they block the chemical transmitter acetylcholine because that's what helps propel food through the intestines. So anything that blocks that neurotransmitter, like Artane or Elavil, anything that blocks the cholinergic activity can cause constipation. Increasing bulk in the diet is important, and I like this quotation that old age is when you prefer oat bran to sowing your wild oats. One of the most important things that you can do, or two of the things for constipation, is increasing your water intake and exercise. Water is a challenge because often the same people who are struggling with constipation may have an overactive bladder. So on one hand, you're trying to drink more water. On the other hand, you suffer consequences of that. This is something that I can give you under a different handout. This is kind of a natural recipe for constipation, which we use a lot or recommend a lot in our clinic, using this wheat bran, applesauce, and prune juice, 1 or 2 tablespoons daily. This can be very helpful, and anything we can treat in a natural way without medications, generally we prefer. So this is something that we can post on our website and get out to you, but can be very helpful. Other things for constipation, if the stool is very hard, drinking more water, of course, or a stool softener, judicious use of laxatives, enemas, osmotic agents, etc. It's important because sometimes it becomes a vicious cycle. The more you become dependent on those, the more you become even more dependent. So Miralax is something that we do use quite a bit, and that can be started at a very low dose every other day. And obviously, if the constipation is really severe, then getting together with the gastroenterologist just to be sure that it's not something other than Parkinson's. Urinary bladder problems are very common in Parkinson's disease. It's usually an overactive bladder with urinary frequency, having to go urgently, incontinent, and having to get up at night to go to the bathroom. Of course, we want to make sure it's not an alternative problem, for instance, an enlarged prostate in a man. So getting a urologist involved is helpful. Again, reviewing medications, and you're going to hear me come back to that theme many times. Careful review of medicines, not just those for Parkinson's. So if you're on a fluid pill for blood pressure, maybe you can try something else. Simple things like regular trips to the bathroom, particularly if you have urgency so you don't get cut short. Minimizing caffeine. And for some people, they shouldn't have any caffeine during the whole second half of the day, and fluid at night. If necessary, a protective pad or diaper. Overnight, there is something called a condom catheter, which can be helpful for some men. Oftentimes, though, it does come off in the middle of the night, but these are at least options to explore. There are a variety of medications that can be used for the bladder. Being careful about those that are what we call anticholinergic, because those not only work on the bladder, which is what's desired, but some of them can get into the brain, and the anticholinergic activity can sometimes interfere with thinking and memory. Other anticholinergics are okay, and many people today are taking Myrbetriq. Most people with Parkinson's disease do not need a catheter. That's really just a last resort, and clearly within the auspices of a urologist being involved. Orthostatic hypotension is a drop in blood pressure with standing. It's very common in Parkinson's and with the treatment for Parkinson's, and more common if you also have diabetes, if you're taking medication for high blood pressure. Traditionally, it causes a feeling of near fainting or an actual faint, but Low blood pressure can also cause other less apparent symptoms like fatigue or trouble concentrating, and sometimes an ache over the head or the shoulders. So when we measure blood pressure, it shouldn't drop by more than 20 millimeters when you go from laying down to stand up, the top number, or 10 millimeters, the bottom number. And if it does, then that's called orthostatic hypotension. So treatment, reviewing medicines, liberalizing salt and water, unless of course you have a heart problem, this would have to be cleared with your cardiologist. Being very careful when you stand up, especially after a meal, because after a meal, there's something called postprandial hypotension or after meal low blood pressure, avoiding large meals, multiple smaller meals. After a hot bath or shower, the blood tends to be drained to some degree from the head. So being very careful there and avoiding dehydration. Other things, avoid straining when you have a bowel movement because that can further lower the blood pressure. Caffeine in this situation in the morning can be helpful. Water, particularly cold water. If you start to get symptomatic from low blood pressure, feeling faint, sitting or laying down is the key thing. But sometimes you can do an isometric exercise, such as squeezing your fists, and that will help. Avoid prolonged laying down or standing during the day. Wearing support hose, even though that's recommended, they have to be the ones that come all the way up to the pelvis. They're very difficult to get on and they're uncomfortable. So I usually don't find those very palatable, but sometimes wearing a lumbar support, that is a Velcro pad that goes around the waist, can be helpful in propping the head of the bed up. When these simple measures aren't helpful enough for low blood pressure, there are some medications that we can use. I won't go through all of them, but they include fludrocortisone. This is a typo here. Midodrine or proamotine, Northera, Mestinon, and others. Sweating and thermoregulation. People with Parkinson's are susceptible to sweating at times, and they're sometimes referred to as drenching sweats. It's not uncommon that they happen in the middle of the night to the extent that you might have to change your bed clothing at night. Sometimes sweating can correlate with the timing of motor fluctuations with levodopa. Treatment, sometimes a low dose of propranolol or an anticholinergic at bedtime can help. It's not uncommon that people with Parkinson's are a little out of sync with the environmental temperature. So oftentimes they can feel warm even when it's cold outside, or the opposite. So just recognize that this is one of the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's. You might not have thought about sweating in the middle of the night, being something's related to the disease. Drooling is fairly common in Parkinson's disease. There does not seem to be overproduction of saliva, but with Parkinson's disease, people don't swallow as frequently or as efficiently, so the saliva tends to pool. There are things that can be done to treat drooling. And the point I want to make, not just with this, but in general, is that even though we may not be able to cure some of these non-motor symptoms, there's generally something that we can try for the majority of them. The cautious use of an anticholinergic or using an eye drop called atropine in the mouth. But one of the best and safest treatments if drooling is really a problem is to inject Botox or a form of that, another type of botulinum toxin into the salivary glands, because that blocks the chemical messenger that leads to the production of saliva. And this is something that we do very often in our clinic and be quite helpful. Sexual dysfunction is common in Parkinson's disease. It's something that admittedly we don't talk enough about in the clinic. Of course, just with aging, there can be some normal changes as well. So this is not always due to Parkinson's. If there are comorbid medical conditions, particularly any type of vascular disease, coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, that can take its effect as well. In men, erectile dysfunction. In women, it can be associated with impaired lubrication or painful intercourse. In both, there's simply diminished energy or stamina for sex. And I'm reminded of the little story of the the woman who said to her husband with Parkinson's, let's go upstairs and make love. And he said, choose one, I can't do both. Decreased libido can happen to some degree just as a consequence of normal aging, but diminished libido can be part of Parkinson's. And I'm reminded the same woman said to her husband, how about some super sex? And he thinks for a minute and he says, I'll take the soup. So there can be diminished libido as well as part of Parkinson's, inability to have an orgasm. But on the opposite end, particularly sometimes medication related, is increased in libido and changes in sexual behavior and interest to a degree that's problematic. And this has been well reported with a variety of Parkinson's medicines, but seen most often with the dopamine agonists. So this is something that, again, we have to warn people about before we prescribe medications, particularly the agonists. But if something like this is happening to you or your spouse or a family member, recognize that this could be something that is medication related and needs to come to medical attention, because oftentimes these things are done surreptitiously or people may feel too embarrassed to bring them up to us. So again, I just want to acquaint you with the spectrum here. I don't think I'll go through everything here, but usually if there's sexual dysfunction, we're often working with a gynecologist or a urologist to determine the cause before we assume that it's Parkinson's disease. And there are a variety of things that can be done to facilitate or aid sexual dysfunction. Let's talk now about sensory symptoms in Parkinson's disease. Pain in someone with Parkinson's is often due to something else, arthritis, etc. But pain can definitely be part of Parkinson's. It's typically not in the joints, but it may be in the larger muscles or the neck or the shoulders, like a frozen shoulder, or the back. It can be quite severe at times. We, of course, have to rule out causes unrelated to Parkinson's. The times where we know that the pain is likely related to Parkinson's is if it fluctuates with the motor fluctuations. So someone says that as my levodopa is wearing off, I start to get a bad pain in my neck or my thigh or my hand, sometimes associated with cramping or abnormal postures. So again, pain can be part of Parkinson's disease. We try to determine the particular cause in terms of treating it. If it is part of the motor fluctuations, then anything that smooths out the motor fluctuations will help pain. If that's not doing it, and if we're convinced that it's due to Parkinson's disease, there are other things we can try: muscle relaxants, seizure medications, antidepressants, Botox, and sometimes certain types of pain, particularly when they're associated with dystonia or abnormal postures, are candidates for deep brain stimulation. Some people with Parkinson's disease can get an internal tremor. We're all aware of the objective outward tremor of Parkinson's, but it's not uncommon that people with Parkinson's feel restless inside their body, something subjective, and something that Dr. Lisa Schuirman investigated earlier in her career. Sometimes it's associated with anxiety, numbness or tingling, and diminished smell often precedes the onset of the motor symptoms of Parkinson's, and that can affect quality of life, particularly because if there's diminished smell, there's usually concurrent diminished taste here. Neuropsychiatric problems we could spend the whole time discussing, and I'm just going to go through the list primarily because I just want you to know what are the spectrum of neuropsychiatric problems in Parkinson's. So if you or a family member, father, mother, etc., is observing these, to know that you have to get treated for it. Depression is very common. And it's not a matter of saying, well, of course you're depressed, you have Parkinson's. Because what we know is there's not always a good correlation between the severity of Parkinson's on one hand and the presence of depression. So if it was just related to the disease, we would expect people who are severely affected by Parkinson's to be depressed, and those who have mild Parkinson's to not be depressed. And that's not the case. So we tend to think about depression as an intrinsic part of the disease. Depression is not just having the occasional down day or down couple of hours, but it's really a persistently low mood from which it's hard to be cheered up. So it's a medical condition that requires medical evaluation and treatment. Equally, if not more common than depression, is anxiety. Of course, if you've had anxiety previously, it could certainly get worse. But there are many people with Parkinson's who have never had problematic anxiety. And all of a sudden, when they get Parkinson's, or even sometimes right before, they can get quite anxious and even have panic attacks, especially as levodopa is wearing off. Hallucinations and delusions tend to occur in the latter stages of Parkinson's. Not everyone gets them. The hallucinations are often formed. That is, it's not sort of a blob, but it may be a small animal or a child. Initially, they might seem quite real. Most people with time can recognize them for what they are, but when they can't recognize them and they're problematic, there are treatments available. We usually start by trying to reduce medication, and if that isn't helpful, there are several medications that can be tried. You've probably heard of that, Nuplazid, and seen all the television ads, but that's one of the options. Hallucinations are often accompanied by delusions, and these are thoughts that aren't based in reality. Someone's trying to harm you, or maybe the delusion that your spouse might be unfaithful, which is called delusional jealousy. I'm just closing the door. Clinic. Apathy, simply having less motivation and interest, can be part of Parkinson's. Impulse control disorders. We recognize these now. I hinted at this with the dopamine agonists. These can include hypersexuality, but gambling, you've probably heard about, shopping, sometimes overeating, or uncontrollable time spent in a hobby, for instance. So these so-called impulse control disorders, you can't really stop these abnormal urges. Executive dysfunction, this usually goes along with the cognitive impairment of Parkinson's, trouble organizing, prioritizing, shifting from one thing to the other, multitasking. Things that people were normally quite good at can become difficult in Parkinson's. Mild cognitive impairment is within that spectrum as well, when someone starts to notice problems with organization or memory, or maybe visual spatial skills, but they're still largely able to compensate. When someone starts to develop cognitive impairment, particularly in more than one area, so memory, maybe language, maybe visual spatial skills, executive functioning, et cetera, that starts to interfere with fulfilling your daily responsibilities, then that would qualify for dementia. So occasionally misplacing your keys, for instance, or forgetting someone's name, or rarely forgetting an appointment in which you can otherwise function well, that isn't so worrisome. It's when you start on a consistent basis to have cognitive impairment that limits your ability to fulfill daily responsibilities, then we start to get concerned. Of course, we make sure there's not something other than Parkinson's at play. And there are things that can be done for the dementia of Parkinson's. Sleep disorders are very common in Parkinson's, almost ubiquitous. People with Parkinson's often have difficulty with sleep, either getting to sleep or staying asleep, or they wake up too early or they sleep during the day. And it's important to recognize that insomnia shouldn't be considered a diagnosis. So it shouldn't go from saying, well, I have insomnia to let me give you a prescription. The real question is, why do you have trouble sleeping? And we try to ferret that out first and treat the underlying cause rather than just treat the symptoms with something to help you sleep. Sometimes we get to that point, but remember, insomnia is a symptom, not a diagnosis by itself. People with Parkinson's and some of the medications can cause vivid dreams or nightmares. What is known as a REM sleep behavioral disorder. We dream during REM sleep and our muscles relax during that time, called atonia, lack of muscle tone. But in Parkinson's and even preceding the motor signs, people get REM sleep, but their muscles don't relax. So they act out on their dreams. Oftentimes they may fight or kick. They can strike the bed partner, or they think they're being chased and they can jump out of bed and sometimes can be hurt. So this is what's known as a REM sleep behavioral disorder. If this is mild and infrequent, it doesn't necessarily have to be treated. Move things from around the bed, which might be injurious. If you're the bed partner, you can simply wake the person up. They'll go back to sleep. And if it becomes more of a problem, we do have medications that can be helpful. Some people with Parkinson's disease develop restless leg syndrome. We'll come back to that. And leg cramps are not an uncommon accompaniment of Parkinson's disease, sometimes respond to an alteration of the medication around bedtime. Some considerations for sleepiness in Parkinson's disease. Many of the Parkinson's medications, particularly the dopamine agonists, can cause daytime sleepiness. The most common cause of daytime sleepiness is inadequate nighttime sleep. But if you're sleepy during the day, a critical review of your medications. And again, the key thing, the first step in treating daytime sleepiness is to improve nighttime sleep. Some important considerations, restless legs, just to know what that is, and it's different than a REM sleep behavioral disorder. You're awake with restless legs, and there's an uncomfortable feeling in the legs. It's usually not painful, but the key thing that there's an urge to move. This is a very common problem, but it does seem to be a little more common in people with Parkinson's. And when people with restless legs go to sleep, they often get kicking movements of their legs, but those are different than true dream enactment because those kicking movements are purposeless, whereas with the REM sleep behavioral disorder, it really looks like someone is acting out some scenario. In terms of other things that can contribute to insomnia, obviously, if you're having to get up to the bathroom several times, that's a non-starter. That needs to be treated. But two of the biggest contributors to insomnia in Parkinson's, depression and anxiety. And when I hear someone who's having significant problems with sleep and the cause isn't apparent, I really question about anxiety and depression. And sometimes the insomnia is the overriding symptom of depression and anxiety. So it's important to ferret those out. Improving sleep hygiene is really key. Trying to have a stable time to go to bed and wake up. Very important to minimize daytime sleeping, particularly long naps later in the day, avoiding caffeine. Exercise is very important to help with sleep, helping insomnia, and avoiding eating close to bedtime. Just to finish up on a few other non-motor symptoms, and I know this has been kind of a whirlwind tour, but at least now you sort of know what's out there. And if this is affecting you, a family member, you know that it needs to be brought to medical attention. So double vision is not uncommon with Parkinson's disease. Double vision is defined as basically seeing two things. And the double vision that people with Parkinson's get is horizontal. The images are separated side by side, typically not up and down or diagonal. So it's side by side. It's typically when you're looking up close, so reading rather than in the distance. And it should go away if you close either eye because it's a misalignment of the eye muscles. And so when you close one eye, they're no longer misaligned. And the usual reason for this is what's known as convergence insufficiency. So normally when we look up close, our eyes have to come in just a little bit. But due to the changes in the brain of Parkinson's, it affects near the area where our brain center for converging is. And so people with Parkinson's may not be able to get their eyes to move together. Seeing the ophthalmologist to be sure there's not something else that's causing it, a prism in one of your glasses, keeping one eye closed when reading, or putting masking tape over one of the lenses of your glasses are things that can help. Fatigue is very common in Parkinson's disease, and it's poorly understood, and it's not just a matter of not being in shape. That I can think distinctly of one of my younger patients who's in excellent physical condition, exercises regularly, but is terribly fatigued. So this is a very real problem in Parkinson's, affecting your motivation and your initiative. Very common, as I said, poorly understood and understudied. Sometimes it's associated with depression or apathy or sleep disorders or deconditioning, drugs or cognitive status or medication. So we always look for these things. It could be deconditioning, but when it's none of those things, it's probably due to Parkinson's disease, and it can be very difficult to treat. There are some things that we can try to help, but just to recognize that fatigue is another one of this long spectrum of non-motor symptoms. So again, this was kind of a whirlwind tour, but at least you know what's out there now. And just to recognize that these are common. Patients or people with Parkinson's may not recognize that something like sweating at night or double vision might in fact be their Parkinson's. And many physicians are unaware of these non-motor symptoms. They can really affect quality of life. They may fluctuate. They're often very treatable. So the key thing is to bring them to the table. It can be due to Parkinson's or its treatment, but we always think about non-Parkinson's symptoms as well. So I'm going to stop there, and maybe we'll have a few minutes for questions. Like I said, I'm still in the clinic. So Christina, are you able to read off any of the questions that are there?
Yes, thank you so much for your talk, Dr. Rich. One question came through so far. Some antidepressants may increase brain levels of dopamine. Are these effective as a treatment for PD?
Generally not. No, so I wouldn't use an antidepressant just for treating Parkinson's disease, but you're right about the dopamine. So you may get a little added benefit from using certain of the antidepressants. For instance, Wellbutrin can do that, but mostly you're not going to experience too much improvement with PD, but you could. Next question.
Can post-surgical sensory pain be exaggerated due to Parkinson's? Specifically, this participant is saying that she had a bilateral mastectomy 7 months ago, and her pain is best described as seizing, spasms, squeezing, unrelated to sutures.
Yeah, that one's hard to know. I wouldn't normally expect post-surgical pain or a post-surgical condition to be exacerbated by Parkinson's. So I think it's important to look for something else. We do keep an open mind, but I think that's typically not the type of pain that we're associating with Parkinson's disease.
Okay, the next question is, I am on an antidepressant, but apathy is a big problem. Any hints for conquering loss of interest and preferring to sleep?
Yeah, well, that's tough. Apathy is very tough. Oftentimes, it's interesting that the person is complaining of apathy because it's typically the spouse or other family members. The person who's apathetic doesn't recognize or care about it. So the fact that you're complaining about the apathy and wanting to sleep, I would wonder if maybe the depression is optimally treated. So that's the first thing that I would consider, or maybe you need to be on another antidepressant or more than one. And I would also investigate how you're doing with the sleeping at night. So the fact that you're complaining of being apathetic, I think a better critical evaluation of the state of your depression treatment would be at least the place I would get started.
Okay, the next question is about, will taking night medication during sleeping hours, will this cause any problems?
Do you mean, well, again, all medicine can cause problems. There's no medicine that doesn't have a side effect. So we have to be careful about it. So for instance, with someone who has a REM sleep behavioral disorder, in whom we're treating with clonazepam, which is a Valium-like drug, sometimes people will notice a little hangover effect. So anything that someone takes at night may in fact have a hangover effect the next day. And so it's just like everything, you discuss potential side effects, you start it. If it's a problem the next day, then you have to reevaluate it. So yes, anything you take at night does still have the potential of having an effect, particularly early the next day.
Okay, and the last question, are there any promising treatments on the horizon?
Well, I wish I could be like really optimistic and say I know of something that's imminently going to be out there. It is frustrating because really, since levodopa has been introduced well over 50 years ago, nothing has really rivaled it in terms of medication. Obviously, deep brain stimulation and now focused ultrasound are wonderful treatments as well. And there have been some nice innovations in treatments, the inhaled levodopa, the subcutaneous apomorphine, et cetera. But these are all more or less adjuncts to levodopa. So there is a lot of research going on about Parkinson's, so I'm very hopeful that we'll have something. But at this time, I don't know of anything that's imminently about to be approved that's going to rival levodopa.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Rich. This concludes our Q&A session.
All right, good. Thanks all of you for participating, and hopefully next year we'll be in person.
Okay, so now we come to the time where you will see 2 evaluation questions appear on your screen. Please take the time to answer those questions, and then I will be back in a few minutes to wrap up with closing remarks for today. Thank you. On behalf of the University of Maryland Parkinson's Disease Center and the Within Our Reach Planning Committee, I want to thank you for joining our virtual symposium today. We hope you are inspired to find new strategies to help you live well with PD. I would like to end with a quote by John Wooden: "Never let the things you cannot do prevent you from doing the things you can." Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.